Do you want me to do my clap thing?
Go.
We good?
This is the Luca Health Podcast, the show that goes beyond sport to understand the people behind the performances.
Welcome back to the pod. Today's guest is someone who's seen rugby from just about every angle, from the highest levels of university sport to the front line of school pitches. Glenn Harrison, on a blue playing for Cambridge University, went on to play for Harlequins and has spent much of his career shaping young players at one of rugby's historic homes, St Paul's School, one of the founding members of the RFU. Now, under master at St Paul's, Glenn is also the architect of the third game, an innovative format designed to make rugby safer, faster and more skill-focused without losing the full contact challenge that makes the sport so special. It's a bold rethink that's already been trialled with some of the top rugby schools in the country, and it could shape the future of the game for the next generation. We're going to talk about the third game, the state of schoolboy rugby in 2025, and where Glenn sees the sport heading in the years ahead. Glenn, welcome to the show. Brilliant to have you with us. How are you?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very good. I've just had a lovely walk over Hammersmith Bridge. I've been in school this morning. I drove into school, a great sight. The rugby pitches were all up, and just planning my pre-season tour with the under-15s to Cambridge, actually, which I was just telling you before. Tony Rogers, who used to be my coach there and a legend of Cambridge rugby, is sort of overseeing our trip, which will be tremendous to see him. But it'd be just good to get back into rugby, actually.
Brilliant, absolutely. Been a nice break for you, but
it has, yeah.
I imagine it's always like an exciting time of year.
Yeah.
You know, as the new school year sort of starts to come into focus. And, the excitement of a new season.
Exactly. I always look forward to the rugby season. I love cricket. I love football, all sports, but it's also an exciting time. End of August, looking forward to pre-season rugby. So looking forward to that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, very excited to get into all of this and to hear more about the third game and sort of the rationale for spending some time thinking about how we might be able to revamp the game to make it slightly more exciting and more attractive to youngsters and parents alike. But before that, I've got a few quick fire questions, if that's okay.
Yeah,
and
sure.
you can, go as long on these answers as you want. They don't have to be sort of one-worded. So, best travel destination with sport?
I've been really lucky and privileged actually through working at St Paul's to go on many cricket tours, rugby tours. I've done many. I think probably Sri Lanka actually with cricket. Just incredible country, beautiful sort of scenery, beautiful people, lovely, friendly people, great hotels, and some real talent in cricket that's sometimes sort of unharnessed, really. So that was probably my favourite tour. I've done all the rugby ones, South Africa, Australia, but that was a little bit niche and quite special.
That's the perk of being a sportsman.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Right, you get to some.
Yeah, I've got a Cape Town cricket tour coming up in February, which is also a great destination. Playing in Cape Town and South Africa is also amazing as well.
It's also a nice time to be out there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Childhood hero?
Interesting one, because actually I love cricket as much as I love rugby, I think. And actually probably when I was growing up 10 years old, actually around there, when you're thinking about heroes in sport, I don't think there were that many English great rugby players, actually. There were lots of good Welsh ones and lots of good French ones, I think, and Australian ones. But so I remember being at Headingley. We drove down from the Yorkshire Dales on a rainy day, thinking it wouldn't be on, and Ian Botham got 149.
Right.
At Headingley. I think they were all but beaten. England in the Ashes were 6 or 7 down. He batted with the tail, got 149. And we went the day after when Willis got 8 wickets. And I think that probably was one of the major catalysts to me loving cricket. And Botham then went on to, you can obviously watch it and read it, went on to win the Ashes almost single-handedly, got runs at hundreds at Old Trafford, I think. So I'm going to go with Ian Botham.
It's amazing how performance can inspire.
Yeah, and just actually they just lit the country up at the time. And there's obviously been things since. Stokes has done this in World Cup and heading
2005.
Yeah, but I think probably cricket. There weren't that many. I don't remember that many English rugby heroes. There's been many since, and in this sort of modern era. But then Ian Botham. Long-winded answer.
No, nice. I think cricket's having a massive revival. This is purely sort of anecdotal but also my experience. I don't know. There's just so much interest, particularly in like most recent Test series against India. I think it's fantastic. And then we've got the Ashes to look forward to.
Well, if you were to ask me now, and I was 10-year-old now, I'd say Joe Root. Obviously, we were just chatting about him. He very soon will be the best ever batsman. He'll overtake Tendulkar, and what an amazing player! What an amazing role model to schoolboys as well. Just sort of no ego, completely about the team. And just incredibly skillful and so it would be Joe Root if it was now, but then Ian Botham.
Undoubtedly, we'll have to get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And fondest sporting memory.
Joe, I'm going to go with this is an interesting one. I think my fondest sporting memory was last summer, end of the last summer, and I was sitting on the terraces at Guildford Cricket Club, Surrey Premier League. Isha Cricket Club were playing Guildford, both sides sort of relegation battle almost, and it's a high level of cricket, Surrey Premier League, and my son, who's a leg spinner, he's played in the side since he was 17, went into about number 8, and Australian fast bowler, I can't remember his name, played in the Big Bash, whistling it down, so he came in at number 8. I think Isha were 40 for 6 and got hit on the head straight away, rubbed it off, and he ended up hitting about 15 sixes, and he got 124 off 80 balls to win each of the game and keep them up. So the meaning of that game, and probably the fact it was my son as well, and the sort of pride in that, but it was an absolutely brilliant innings to watch. And when you play well and it actually has an importance attached to it. So that's, I remember sitting there with a lot of pride, but also just loving it. And that's probably my favourite sporting memory. So wouldn't be anything I've done, but it would be things watching. And another great memory was actually watching the first team at St Paul's. I used to coach the first team. I now coach in the 15s. But we played Whitgift in the quarter-final or semi-final of it was the Daily Mail Cup then. Mm-hmm. And they had Cipriani, etc., about 4 or 5 England schoolboys, and we didn't really have... we might have had one centre, Hugo Walford, but we won 24-22. And it was just an extraordinary win and an extraordinary performance. And we were 18-0 down. So the big comeback, no one expected it. Lots of the press before the Daily Mail said, no chance. I think the Whitgift coach, actually, I'd say, well, the way they play, they almost... Doubt we've got a problem,
right?
And actually, and that was an incredible memory of watching from a coaching perspective, watching sport, watching my son get 124 off 80 balls to keep Isha up last summer was probably my favourite memory.
Brilliant,
yeah.
And toughest opponent?
From a coaching perspective, over a long period of time, regular opponents at St Paul's. I'm going to say Tunbridge School, just a fantastic school, similar ethos. Don't go mad with too many scholars, proper rugby. And whether it's first team or under 15s, whichever I coached, it was always actually who's going to win this,
Ding dong batter.
And that might be the same at sort of every level, A, B, C, D, whatever. But the A teams and the first team, 50% of the time Tunbridge would win, 50% of the time we would win. Always fair, always great lads, humility, humble, whoever won. But they were really tough as well. So that's probably my toughest opponent regarding coaching.
Is that the traditional main rivalry that St Paul's has? Or
I think now St Paul's play on a circuit with sort of Tunbridge, Eton, Dulwich. They're all rivals and they're all sort of similar schools in that sense. I think we've probably tweaked our fixture list a little bit so we don't play the absolute giants of rugby who are probably too strong.
I think we might get into
do it slightly different way.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. We were very fortunate to have 3 interns back in July. One from St Paul's, who I know that he's in your house, isn't he, Gabriel?
Yeah, that's right.
And a couple of lads from Eton who had just left, and there was no love lost. There was a lot of banter lying around in the office for those couple of weeks about various matches over the years and who'd done what and everything else, which was just you sort of forget what it means sometimes when you're a bit removed like I am from school and stuff.
Yeah. But it's great, isn't it?
Fantastic.
And they're the sort of schools I think that are similar to us that play fantastic rugby, and it's not the be all and end all though either. They're doing sort of high academic. They're doing art. They're doing everything, drama, and rugby's just a part of that week and day, and that's probably how it should be in the school.
I completely agree. It's not the be all and the end all. Okay, amazing. Well, I feel like we know you a bit now, but also going to dig into your background even further, I think, before we get into schoolboy rugby in the third game and things. So you grew up north, Yorkshire Dales, Wharfdale.
I played at Wharfdale. Yeah, I grew up in the Yorkshire Dales. Just amazing place, and grew up playing at Wharfdale, which I absolutely loved and adored. And as I say, I don't get back there often enough. Most of my family are still there. But yeah, grew up at Wharfdale and at Erminstead's Grammar School, which was a sort of grammar school that loved rugby, played rugby, and had a good grounding in rugby and an education really.
And your route down to the big smoke and spending 3 decades, I think it is nearly, at St Paul's was via Cambridge University, and then a stint playing sort of bridging the amateur professional era. With Quins, I was doing some research for the podcast and saw that your varsity match performance was one that most people dream about. In front, full Twickenham, 78,000 people, and you scored the match-winning try. How was that experience winning a blue?
It mattered a lot to me, that game. It's funny, for different reasons. Rugby matters to you for different reasons, but I mean, for me. I just felt privileged and lucky to be even at Cambridge. And actually, I played quite well for about 2 or 3 games, got injured. And then just before the varsity match, I actually played for the Steel Bodgers against Cambridge. It was the last throw of the dice. And I played outside Frank Clough, who was an England centre, who ironically is my boss at St Paul's. He's the Sir Master at St Paul's now. He made me look good, I played quite well outside him, then got picked. Then leading into the varsity match, I guess I had a lot of good energy. I played quite well, but it was interesting. So one of the reasons I think intrinsically why I wanted to play well there was my dad was at Cambridge in the late 50s and was at Christ College where I went, and he died when I was 12 or 13.
Sorry to hear that.
But he was in the side all the way through to the varsity match and was dropped the match before. And I still know from chatting to my mum and relatives that my grandparents then that was his biggest disappointment in his life, that he didn't get a blue. 100%. And so I think that sort of energy that I had a chance to do that and almost play well. I think for him in that sense was something that fueled me. But it was amazing. I was coming back from walking the pitch. I was a bit nervous, and I was coming back into just about to put my shirt on, which I was very proud of wearing. And in my house, it was well known that this person, he was dropped for Alan Godson, right? So he was dropped for this centre called Alan Godson. And I was walking on the day of the match, and this Alan Godson had taken the trouble to come all the way to Twickenham. He came down from the stands just as I was going in, and he tapped me on the shoulder. "I'm Alan Godson." And he said, "I just wanted to wish you, I knew your dad, I wanted to wish you the very best of luck today. You're going to be brilliant. You're going to play well." And it was just reminded me, I think, and it just centre focused what I was there to do. And I did have a good game. I wasn't a great player, but I did have a good game that day. Cambridge had a good side. They had sort of Gareth Rees, Spencer Bromley, De Kock, the South African scrum half. They were good. I remember Dick Best saying on Rugby Special on the Sunday, I think they were unbeaten. They'd beaten Romania. And I remember him saying, Oxford will win by country mile. And so that sort of fired us up a bit. And we won 22-26, and I got a decent try. I was being caught up every single step of the way by Tyrone Howe, actually, who was I think he ended up being a British Lion, didn't he? But he certainly played for Ireland. He's now headmaster of Shiplake and a fantastic bloke. But gaining on me, and I sort of slid the last 4 or 5 metres on the dewy surface to score. But it was a great game, great occasion. Being at Cambridge was actually full of. I remember you talked to Russell Earnshaw recently, didn't you? And I remember you're just surrounded by great people. Oh. You learn so much. You learn so much from coaches, from players, and just the experience of being there. But for me, it had a sort of extra sort of emotional sort of sense of being there. And we won, and we had a great time. And playing at Twickenham, then it was a full stadium almost, and in fact it was full, I think, and it's in many senses. We had a pretty good side, but on paper we weren't as good as Oxford, I don't think. But
that's an amazing story. But he didn't say that. Actually, I took your dad's place. He just came to.
It just came made the
luck, and I think that's what I've been lucky enough to play in the varsity match, and it's a very special. It's a special event, isn't it? And I think those, like, Oxbridge isn't for everyone, and like it's obviously absolutely not the pinnacle of rugby. Like it was, I think it genuinely was, wasn't it? Like back in the day, it was sort of like seen as a bit of a test match selection thing. Whereas, when I played, it was not in front of 78,000 people. It's probably in front of like 22,000 or something like that. But I just remember it being such an incredible, like that term just being such an incredible experience of like bonding with lads and wanting to do anything for them. And it was such a throwback for me to like those school days. Yeah. Having then been fortunate enough to go and experience a little bit of professional stuff. Yeah. It was back to the roots of why I fell in love with rugby and what it was all about. And it sounds like you had a similar experience, and it means a hell of a lot to people involved, rightly so. And it's just, that's incredible. It's funny that you mentioned also two people that taught me at Uppingham. Frank Clough was at Uppingham when I was a student there, and then Tyrone also.
Was
so
he?
it's just
amazing.
It's such it's such a small world. This is
it's incredibly small world, isn't it? Yeah. But I agree with that. Just the same in schoolboy rugby, isn't it? That we need to remind when we come later to talk about sort of injuries and keeping people playing, we need to remind parents what a great game it is, and actually it's not just the skill and the athleticism, etc., that you gather. It's that shared experiences, it's the sort of resilience, the character, the sort of that common purpose, and the memories you create, and the leadership and characteristics that will serve you in life. And I think we need to spend more time sort of reminding parents that actually when you go looking at it against the risk of is it a dangerous game, you should shine a line on that more, I think, and get as many boys playing, because obviously, the fallout in boys playing rugby has been significant, and that's a concern.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, it's easy to pay lip service to the fact that you'll make friends for life and all that, but you genuinely do. You know, the people that I played at school with and then at Oxford with, I don't have to see them for a few years, but then when we do, like, you're back there, aren't you? Yeah, I'm sure it's like similar for you with reunions over the years. And Russell was sort of, when we spoke to him back in the spring, just before the varsity match, he was saying that he was going back to Cambridge with his year group for a bit of a tour around the city before going down to watch the rugby. We did that a couple of years ago, and with Tony, I think, actually.
Tony, Tony, and then we all met up and we watched. Actually, the game was at Saracens now. It was not at Twickenham anymore, but it's just great to see everybody, and it was so good days.
And then after Cambridge, joined St Paul's Juniors and combine that with playing at Quinn?
I did. Interestingly, I was going to go back north to the Dales, and I ironically, Dick Best, who I mentioned, actually convinced me to play at Harlequins, and he was a great coach, by the way. I know it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but great sort of brilliant insight into backs and forwards. Teams have so many coaches now, but he was a really sharp coach and had a great record with England as well, actually. I had a great time at Quinn Session. It was in the time where it went just literally professional. So all those young players were sort of gathering, trying to get a contract. Most of them already knew who was getting the contract. I was lucky enough to get one. And most of the time I was there, I was sort of, I just about broke into the first team. I remember actually playing at Bath at the Rec, and Bath had, I think, in their it was the A-team game, and they had about 5 internationals playing. I think Gagan, Perry, Adebayo. They had an unbelievable team. We beat them, and I actually got a hat trick that day, and I think Earnshaw might have been playing for Bath.
Yeah, did he play? I think he was down there. I think he
was playing, and I thought, that's it. I said, I'll be in the first team. And I did get in the first team for a little bit. So I did play Quinn's first team for a little bit. But then they signed Gary Connolly and Robbie Paul and the centres. And they were just better than me. And obviously Will Carling was there. And so but you know what? I loved the experience in the sense that I learned so much from better players than me and coaches. Did I enjoy the experience in terms of it just turned professional? I don't think they got it quite right. They trained for 2 or 3 hours between about 11 and 1. Then they did another session in the evening. Then I still had a job, so I missed that 11 till 1, but I had to do it. It was an absolute sledgehammer. I had to do it basically at 4 o'clock, the one I'd missed. So I trained from 4 till 9 at night, basically. It was crazy. I mean, you just wouldn't do that now. No. And I just remember falling asleep everywhere, actually thinking, this is not that much fun, actually. But it was great. And there was a lot of good players, a lot of good people. It was a great experience. The way rugby changed then, people got stronger, faster, fitter. I did a little bit, but not fit or fast enough. I never was. But it was a great experience. But it came to a point actually where I got a chance to move from the junior school to the senior school. And that was a catalyst to me actually saying, thanks, Dick.
Enough's enough.
Yeah. Enough's enough. I said, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I've got an opportunity, and I loved coaching. I loved teaching, to move into the senior schools. I'm so privileged to have worked at St. Paul's. It's an incredible school. And, I've changed head of rugby, director of sport under Master now. Both my boys, Freddie and Henry, have been through there, played first team rugby, went on to Durham University. Great boys, and very proud of them both. But I've been lucky that they've had a chance to experience that. I've had a great chance to work in a school where boys are incredibly bright. Teaching is amazing. Yeah. And the sport's been really good, where it's strong at rowing, strong at rugby, strong at all sports, really. And so I've been really lucky.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal school from what I've sort of experienced of it. We're sat just across the bridge, in Hammersmith, and I think we first met actually at the school back in February at Sam Peter's ahead of the game event, where you sort of spreading awareness and doing some education and holding panels on concussion and the risk of head injury in sports like rugby. And I think it's obviously a very good initiative and thing for schools to be aware of, which they are already and are increasingly aware of what else they can be doing. But very cool. Was it, just back to Quins just quickly, was it a scramble like when it turned professional? I've just heard from a few people like everyone Lawson at the Saints, it was kind of like, we're turning professional, like we better sign people up. And
I just remember all the sort of young sort of want to be wannabes like me thinking, oh gosh, we know that all the Carlings and Woods and all these guys were going to get professional contracts, but there would be about 15 or so of people like me that were desperate to get, and I know maybe 4 or 5 got them. So it was a scramble in that sense, but some amazing players there at that time. I just remember I remember people like Lauren Caban was there, who was one of my favourite players ever, just in terms of the game we're talking about and space and not needing to be big. I just watched clips of him. He was just elegant, gliding, but tough as well. And just one of the greatest back row players, I say, just ran against the grain of needed to be. Look at the size of them.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, I'm not sure he did that much weights or S&C and didn't need to. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Right. So from Quins to today, you spent a few decades at St. Paul's. How do you reflect on how like the school game has changed in that time period? I think, just from some of the things that I've been thinking about, obviously there's many more alternatives to playing rugby. I think it's not necessarily compulsory in many schools, or at least if it is, the non-contact version of the game is offered. Just where are we sort of 2025 versus maybe when you joined?
I don't think it can be compulsory these days, to be honest. I think you probably read all the papers about the number of boys dropping out of rugby. Yeah. I think it's between 25 and 30% over a long period of time. When I used to run rugby, we had 24 sides, five teams in most years, and now it's probably down to about 14. But I think that's commonplace. That's St. Paul's. And what's happened? What's changed? Other sports are definitely in competition with rugby because you can't make it compulsory. But there is clearly a perception with parents from what they see and what they read, and the rates of concussion and injuries that actually, is it a safe game? And I think schools have to weigh that up. Parents have to weigh that up. And that's why I said a minute ago, we have to really keep reminding them actually that why it's a good game. And also we have to remind them as well, in my opinion, there's never been more done to make rugby safer. Coaches are much more adept at coaching. There's basically little contact done in training. Schools are working with people like Luca Health to make sure that there's an awareness and tracking and picking up concussions and making sure that injuries are are spotted, looked after properly. So I think it's as well as that, we are looking at new versions of the game, new laws to make it better. So, but in answer to your question, how has rugby changed? I think one simple thing is the size of the players. The size of the players in my book, even first team, as you look at under 16s now, look like first team players when I was coaching. That's, for instance, that game against Whitgift back in the day. So the size of players and the sort of desire, I think, to replicate what they see on telly, the professional game, too young in my opinion. So, the under 14s come in, massive children playing in the prep school sevens, schools are going shopping to pick them, and you're playing against absolute giants. And because defences are much better than they used to be, jackling is taught really well, there's not that much space to play. Yeah. So what happens is you get these giants repeat running in through smaller kids, and the optic is quite often injuries, sometimes bad injuries, and lots of medics going on the pitch. And as your parents watching that, it's not a great thing. And I do think that is a change compared to what the game used to look like, where size. They're also, I think, Nick, I think that a lot of kids, understandably, they want to do as well as they can, and they're quite often obsessed with getting into academies and EPPs, and they're also sort of thinking, I need to be at this point, at 14 years old or 15 years old, that perhaps that's because of the way the game is, because of what the expectation is. They're trying to get there too quickly, and there needs to be more education and child-centered approach on just actually their age. They're related to what sort of training they should be doing, whether they're taking supplements and protein and just trying to get too big. At St. Paul's, we've got a brilliant S&C coach who actually makes sure our boys between 14 and 16 just they do work in the gym, but they work on movements and safe movements, and they have to get to this block before they can even lift any weight. Yeah. Then they go through these tick boxes to get there, and they're educated properly. They're not allowed, we say they're not allowed, it's not illegal, they can, but it's our policy that they don't take supplements, etc., because they're schoolboys, and that's our sort of, I think, right approach on a sort of child-centered educational approach to rugby. But I don't think, I don't think now that's the case generally. I think there is, understandably, children want to get into academies. They want to get into that next level. And I think they're getting too big and too obsessed with this too early. And it makes them more effective in a junior game. I don't think the skill level's any better than it was years ago. I think just the size and the physique of players has changed. So that's been the biggest change.
That's very interesting. And I'm pleased to hear that something's being done about, there are controls in place, like with S&C. Yeah. When I left school in 2008, there were no S&C coaches, right? Yeah. You just did whatever you did. And if you were in an academy, you were probably having supplements shipped to, I was at a boarding school at Uppingham. Supplements shipped up there, barbell shipped up there. Yeah. And I did what you were trying to avoid, is just bang on loads of weight. And then you're very effective. Yeah. At that level, but then you get found out because either your body breaks down, which it did with me, and or because you're not developing your skills. Yeah. And actually, just because you can run through or run around people in a schoolboy game, you're never going to be able to do that if you have aspirations to go further. No. And so I think it's very encouraging that schools are putting sort of checks and balances in place, because, as you say, they're schoolboys and girls, and they should be learning the skills in the game and playing a good version of it. I think with getting bigger and things, it's a byproduct of, I guess, the semi-professionalization of school rugby, right? If you look at what had happened sort of outside of the pitch as well, with S&C coming in, with games being recorded and analysis and everything around it, the build-up of festivals, and what does Roslyn Park look like now versus what it looked like 15 years ago? It's night and day, isn't it? And so you've almost got this quasi-professionalization school game. And I think now we're realizing that has negative externalities, undoubtedly, because we're just seeing a non-professional version of a professional game, and that's not good as a spectacle, and it's definitely not good from an injury standpoint. So And yet schools still want rugby to be played because it does have so many benefits if it can be delivered in an appropriate way. And I think, I've read a Guardian article where the head at St Paul's, Sally Ann, was sort of saying, St Paul's has a rich history in the game, one of the founding members of the RFU and a proponent of rugby schools like handling version of the game. If we're going back right from to the start, and she's like, she's a believer in the game and its benefits. And so I think it's just, it's important that I guess schools, as best as they possibly can, like put those checks in place, but also maybe try and work out how they actually like deliver that messaging to parents around those benefits. Because I think there is a PR battle that's probably being lost quite heavily at the moment.
We've got to do more.
And there's no pop at schools. Like, I think it's a really hard thing to do.
No, I completely agree. And everything I said that St Paul's are doing, I'm sure lots of schools are doing it, isn't. I'm not trying to say St Paul's are anything special, but I'm sure. But you're right. Sally Ann and Fran are both massive supporters of the game, but they're also forward thinking enough to realise actually, and they were the ones actually that actually I work with the idea of doing my sabbatical, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they very much want to keep the game going, but there actually is a realization, I think, that we need to rethink and make sure that in the future the game's, still safe and viable, which I'm confident it will be. But the more we can do to promote how brilliant the game is and the ideas and why it's brilliant, to overcome that fear in parents' eyes that it's not safe, that's the important thing.
Totally, because I was looking at the RFU has like published a paper that they've done on injuries in schools rugby, and it's a few years old, but it basically followed 35 schools, so 66 teams, like basically just under 2 teams per one of those schools across like 2017 through 2022, and concussion is the most common injury.
Yeah,
they followed under 13s, under 15s, under 18s, and concussion is the most prevalent injury. But it's also maybe not as prevalent as people might think, based on what they hear in the media and everything else. It is more severe, the concussions, and people tend to be out for longer in the higher age group, like in under 18s. There's a concussion every 5 matches on average in under 18s. And then for under 15s, it's 1 in 10. Under 13, it's even less. So I think, maybe people assume that there are many more concussions per match, and I'm not trying to downplay concussion. No. We are a concussion business. But
I would. How old was that again?
So that data is a number of the last year of the study was 2019, 2020. So I'm not saying that those are the exact numbers.
No. I think that's probably right, and it's I would probably. So now the game's more changed recently. I think as people are getting bigger at under 15 level, I think there'll be more than that at under 15 level. Like say you watch and you play all these big schoolboy games. I think that figure may have increased since then. And, but I don't know.
But one of the reasons from that paper, which I'll put in the show notes of the podcast, was basically saying that the tackle is the primary, like, sort of cause of injury and concussion. And that's because there's just too much contact, right? And so this then leads into your third game initiative and the sabbatical that you took. Yeah. So third game is supposed to be sort of, you've got touch rugby and you got, the full version of the game, and the third game sits somewhere in the middle.
Well, I sort of started with that notion actually, Hick, and so I did a sabbatical, and I started off thinking, I was actually charged initially with just doing a paper of the state of schoolboy rugby. I realised fairly quickly that people like Neil Rollins had done really good versions of that. So it'd already been done, and it wasn't great reading. So I decided to do something solution based, and I met with people, a couple of people I knew actually, with Simon Kemp, who's I think the medical director of the RFU, and John Lawn, who's in charge of all the law development at the RFU. And I went to them and went through the proposal of actually creating a different version of the game. They put me in touch with Keith Stokes, who's a great guy actually at Bath University, he looks and explores actually the evidence and the stats of which parts of the game actually do cause injuries. So you're right. The repeat collisions and tackle situation, particularly I think in the sort of midfield where they're up to high speed, and the breakdown, were the two main ones, actually, I wanted to focus on this different variation of the game. So I came up with, I think, not just a game, and I came up with this with Keith and John, and I came back to them. We had a few meetings. I said, this is a starting point of, I want to produce something that actually reduces the number of collisions, reduces injuries at the breakdown, but also, as a byproduct of it, makes it a quicker game where more people, you don't have to be massive, more people have more touches, and it's a skill development game as well as a safer game. So that was the brief, really. And we sort of went in and we thought, we'll do a pilot. They were brilliant. The RFU were brilliant, actually. Yeah, but because actually getting anything through at the RFU is really hard. There's lots of subcommittees. Yeah. But John Law in the RFU said, no, actually, I like this. We'll do it. And we tweaked it a little bit. Keith Stokes actually came up with the basic rules of it were actually getting rid of the jackal.
Yeah.
Is the first one, because actually a lot of injuries are caused. So it's so well coached now. It slows the ball down, but it causes injury, but also gives defences lots of time to set. So it's less space. So it would speed the ball up, actually make it a quicker game and reduce injuries for that reason. Also, we looked at two things to reduce the number of collisions in the midfield. Okay. One of them actually, so the first one was my idea of actually we need to reward sort of handling, offloading, scoring out wide, and we need to actually almost penalise just the moronic sort of replay of big guys running at little guys. So I came with the notion, and it's sort of I suppose it's the sense of taking a little bit from rugby league, and it is that actually after you'd bashed in 4 and you'd had 5 breakdowns, it would be a turnover. The opposition, so all the time the referee's refereeing, he's going phase 1, phase 2, they're already thinking, I can't keep just doing that. So they moved it wide out, and that worked really well in the pilot. And Keith Stokes came up with another one, let's take it a stage further. And he said, well, let's also penalise the ball carrier a little bit like you do in basketball for just actually seeking contact and running into contact rather than footwork in space. And that was explained to the boys in the pilot. I wasn't sure whether that one would work, actually. And, it really did. It was only penalised about 3 times the other day.
Hard to referee that?
It probably is. Yeah. But actually, it was made clear. And because it was penalised quite early, the boys said, actually, I can't do that. So they started to look for footwork and space. So it actually did work. And I spoke recently at Warwick University. I saw a few symposium trying to promote sort of ideas around this. And there was quite a bit of opposition to that law. People couldn't see how it would refer. It works better in practice than it would with your perception of how it might work. But also the other thing was you'd get more points for scoring out wide. It was encouraging offloading space and actually getting rid of the jackal, changing the ideas of producing less collisions. And we piloted it at St Paul's, about 4 hours of rugby. I think we had Tunbridge, Hampton, Just Guildford. Who else did we have there? KCS. We had 5 or 6 schools and St Paul's, and we had about 4 hours of rugby. And they struggled a little bit with that start, but by the end of it, they started to play, and it looked really well. And I remember we had dinner afterwards. I remember talking to a couple of the coaches afterwards, and once actually you could see the skill development throughout the afternoon, as well as actually the fact that not even once did a paramedic even have to go into the pitch within a sort of 4-hour period. Though that doesn't mean to say 4 hours small pilot that there's evidence that makes the game safer. But it was an indicator that actually it could, and there was an indicator that it definitely, the RFU obviously filmed it, analysed it, sent out anonymous feedback to all players, coaches, and it came back really, really pleasing, that, more enjoyable, more touches, wingers getting the ball more, and there was enough good feedback, I think, for them to take it seriously and look at doing more ideas. I don't think there'll be a third game in terms of, I don't think there'll be touch rugby, and that was initially the purpose. But I think what might happen is that I think the RFU are looking at and exploring taking at least a couple of those laws from that into the under-16 downwards game and just trialing them and seeing where that goes. I mean, the game's in good shape, I think, but you can always actually improve it, I think.
Totally. And I guess you're creating a disincentive just to have big lumps on the pitch.
Yeah,
they're not going to be rewarded for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So then, like, people are going to develop more naturally.
Well, the beauty of rugby, it's always been a game for all shapes and sizes. But I don't think what you do want is everybody just thinking they've got to be massive. And as I say, then you can tweak your fixture list so you don't play certain schools. But actually, generally speaking, I don't think you want the under 14 to under 16 game looking like everybody's trying to mirror professional rugby, because that's half the problem in their heads. And it's incumbent on, I think when I spoke at this conference, there was a mixed response. I think there was definitely a sense from, I think, some coaches that actually, well, we can do this by the way we coach, and they're not wrong. And there was a lot of good challenges to what sense. I sense there was a little bit more support from the sort of schools rather than the clubs, because I think schools have to sort of justify the game. They have to risk assess it to their governors, to their parents, whereas maybe clubs don't. But, I've coached in schools, I've coached in club rugby, junior rugby, and I understand the whole picture. But I think there's always opposition. And whenever you're sort of talking about any change, there's always going to be opposition. I remember, Nick, I watched rugby for a long time. The game now is a lot better than it used to be. When the games we were talking about before, the lineouts, before they had lifting, were shambles. The scrums. I remember there being lots of opposition to the recent changes to the scrums. If you watch video clips now of the old scrums where they're just plowing into each other.
A proper event, wasn't it? But
loads of injuries.
Incredibly dangerous.
Loads of resets. So there was a lot of opposition to that change. Yeah. But you look at now, scrums are a lot better. They're a lot safer. Statistically, very few injuries in scrums now. So made the game better, less injuries. So that's, and actually same with many of the other laws. People will be skeptical to change, but actually I think it's important to have an open mind, because we're at a really important time in rugby where people are dropping out of the game. And whilst it's a great product, it's a great game, can we make it even better? Can we make it safer? Can we also, prove to our parents, I think, that actually we're thinking about it and we're trying to make it safer. We actually had I'm not saying it was because of the third game, definitely, but I think the St. Paul's staff and the head of rugby and the coaches do a great job. But we actually had last year, I think we had more teams playing. We got a 15 Ds last year for the first time for years. So actually that's a great thing. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I think, the more we can do to say, this is a great game. This is what we're doing. This is what we're exploring. This is what you get from playing rugby. Actually, we're also working with people to make it as safe as possible and educating staff. But it's difficult. It's not easy running a rugby program these days, trying to get staff that are prepared to give up their time to sort of do extra sort of safety courses, extra coaching courses, as well as being academic teachers and all the marking they've got. It's a really difficult job. Head of rugby is a really difficult job these days. It's much harder than when I used to run it. There's a lot more to think about.
Totally. No, I think it's an amazing sort of concept that you came up with. And what was I going to say about this? I
don't know. I don't know where they'll go with it, Nick. Honestly, I think. And to be honest, from my point of view, it was something that was, I think, a really enjoyable thing to be part of and do. I really appreciate the support the RFU had in not just sort of coming up with it with me, but also supporting it. And as I say, I think if anything good comes from it, if they do tweak the laws and it makes it better, and ultimately, the overall objective I would like and want is for more boys to be playing the game. So not just A teams and first teams getting better, but more boys to be playing the game. I think it's interesting. I watched your podcast with the chap from Next Generation, actually.
Angus Savage.
And I find that's a fascinating, because as you mentioned before, you've got as coaches, you want to make it as safe as possible. You want to make it relevant to the boys, be child-centered about it. But for the boys, they want to be on live stream, don't they? And they want to be top of that league and they want to win. And that's right. Shouldn't take that from them. And that's a really good vehicle for doing that, I think. But I think it should be important for all boys, whether you're in the D team, C team, B team. And I remember coming up when I was director of sport, actually, it never came off. But one thing I think would be a good idea is to have have a league of schools that are similar, like Dulwich, Tunbridge, St Paul's, Eton, whatever. But to come up with a league where you feed in every result of the day. So, and to get the next generation sort of talking about D team games and B team games and feed their results into a sort of website, and you have a league table based on all the teams being important, not just the A team and the first team.
Oh, I see. So like a school, like the league across the, you know, if you've got 3 or 4 teams and
or just a trophy. But it would have the problem with that. You'd need a circuit of teams that you play.
Yeah.
So you could do it. Well, you could do it with 5 or 6 schools, and we definitely talked about it. Could be Tunbridge, for example. But feed every single result on that day on your Blockfish into a sort of program or a cup or a league, and your D team counts just as much as your A team. And then you're actually, the importance from the boys' point of view, this means a lot. We're actually being recognised here. It's good. That also keeps boys playing, I think.
Totally.
I think that's
totally. And from the pilot that you ran at St Paul's a couple of years ago now, isn't it? Almost. How did the boys take to it? Were there smiles on faces? Because I'm just thinking it's a much more interesting and enjoyable version of the game.
Yeah. Well, the St Paul's, it was done at B team level actually, and the St Paul's boys, literally, they were. I think they were on the day. I think they probably, it wasn't about results or anything, but they probably. Did they? They played it pretty well. Everybody did in the end, but they basically said the next day, because I take them to 15. Well, can we just play this every week? Can't we just? So we didn't play every week on Saturday because every school don't play, but they did. We did play it in training as sort of training games, and we used it in training, and they loved it. Yeah, and particularly the wingers and the outside centres and the fullback.
Exactly, and I think. Yeah, you might get pushback from clubs because, well, it's just more effort, isn't it? To sort of like, you know, they have a certain way of playing, and, you know, they're going to have big boys in there, and they might want to sort of retain that style of play because that's what they've always known, and it might be effective. And I think unless you do regulate things,
well, I think
wishful thinking.
I think the problem is, and they made some really good. Everybody made some really good points at the thing at Warwick University I spoke at, but it's incumbent on whether you're club or school to make the game as safe as possible. No one would argue with that. But the argument that probably some people made was actually, well, we can coach it in this way, and actually you don't want to take away the decision making of the pupils, not be able to do that. And I don't know, my response is actually you're making better decisions if you're not taking contact anyway. You're actually thinking to offload a hit space first and avoiding contact. But you know what? Another argument might be, well, actually winning contact and contact skills are a massive part of rugby. Don't dilute them, you know. So there's arguments both ways, aren't there? And but I think there's just probably more support from schools, more to do with the fact that we kind of have to take this seriously. But you know, there's some great points that the club coaches made, and there's some good people, and it's just whenever any change is put on the table, people are resistant to change, and it may be because there's only been a relatively small pilot. If we've been honest, it may be none of these laws within the 30 game happen, but I'm hopeful that a couple of them at least will be explored in at least a couple of age groups.
Yeah, I can see how it might be difficult to have all the way up to under 18 follow those rules. Particularly, obviously, it does need to be a platform to jump into academies and to go and play professionally for those guys. But obviously, we need to be sort of looking after everybody else, because if we don't have those B, C, D teams, then sort of rugby would inevitably die to some extent. Right, but I think, you know, up to under 16, if some of those rules are implemented, you know, particularly around like limiting the number of phases and picking off the base and the jackal, I think that can only be a good thing, because it's going to create more skillful players with better handling who understand the game better and can identify and sort of, you know, manipulate space. And you're making more intelligent rugby players at 16 who then you can layer on those contact skills and they can get bigger in a natural way, and then take that next leap if that's for them. And if not, they're just gonna have experienced a really, you know, they should have enjoyed their rugby experience at school or at club or whatever it might be in a way that perhaps some aren't at the moment, which is maybe why some of those numbers are dwindling.
I think so, Nick. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, this is an opinion, so this is not evidence-based, this comment. But if I look at sort of 14, 15-year-olds that perhaps are given the sort of chance to join Quins or whatever, or these EPPs academies, I think it's too much based on size and maybe athleticism and size and potential, rather than, I think it should be more looking at on skill, footwork, skill. And I don't think they look at that as much as size. And that's because I think of the way the game is. You need size to be able to play the game the way it is now. And that's why that's the idea behind changes to the laws. And I think that's potentially the same with some schools that give out sort of quite a few scholarships. I think they look at kids at prep schools and in the sort of Rosslyn Park Sevens, and they'll be shopping for the Giants.
Yeah, totally. And I think everything that you're saying about the third game, or about some of these changes that might come in, when do you think they might, if they do? When was the symposium, by the way?
So it was about a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was to listen to, just, and the RFU are taking really seriously the idea of third game. They've done other pilots of it as well. And I think there's enough evidence that it might be a good idea. And so then they just opened it up to a big symposium where there were people from clubs, schools there, and they're just getting feedback really from people. And I think from that feedback, they're not going to say, right, there's not enough evidence to think this is a good idea, but I think what they might do, everything takes quite a long time, understandably, to change. But I think they'll look at a couple of the laws to trial further and in a bigger way. Is my hope. I don't know that, but it's my hope.
I mean, that's the start, isn't it? And that's the hope. I think it's really fantastic that, people like yourself have spent time thinking about how we might be able to make the game safer and more attractive. It's not just you've looked at it from sort of a rules standpoint, but there are other groups who are effectively sort of espousing like the philosophy that you're talking about and coaching kids in that, even within the current structure of the rules. So like, okay, the rugby rules are set, they can't influence that, but can we actually coach youngsters to develop those skills and to identify space rather than just chucking the ball up? And I was really fortunate to spend a day with the Le Plaisir du Mouvement group at Kingham Hill School a couple of Fridays ago. This is a philosophy that's sort of been born and bred out of Toulouse and Toulouse Academy. Pierre Villepreux was sort of like, one of the first disciples of this way of playing. And obviously it's been incredibly effective for Toulouse, and, they're the best European club side, have been for a number of years now. And they play a brilliant brand of rugby, don't they? Like everyone can handle, everyone can offload. It's sort of rugby back, from the 70s and 80s when you watch like those great Welsh sides that you were alluding to earlier. And it was just awesome to spend a day with them because they were coaching 130 kids, week-long course at Kingham Hill School. It was residential. And it was all about attacking those wide channels and being penalised for trucking it up. And no one was over sort of refereeing knock-ons or balls that were going down. It was giving people a license to try things in a way that sometimes it gets a bit structured and a fear of failure creeps in. And then what do you do if you're not sure about your handling skills or your ability to hit a big pass off your backhand? You probably just chuck it up, don't you? So it was really brilliant to see, and not just 130 kids were being coached in that way of playing and thinking about the game, but also they coach coaches at the same time. So there were 20 coaches with them for the week, and those coaches were learning from the core coaches, and they were delivering certain parts of the sessions to the kids. But obviously those coaches are there because then they can be, have this philosophy sort of, instilled in them so that they can go back to their clubs or their schools. And so I just think it's really positive. Like not everyone, but like it's quite easy to be negative about the game and talk about, playing numbers dwindling and injury rates increasing and it being so stodgy and all the rest of it. But like stuff is happening.
Oh, definitely.
You can't just change a game that's been around for a very long time overnight, and there are certain structures in place, right?
And some people listening to this will be thinking, well, I'm generalizing here. I'm saying that I am generalizing, but actually there are great coaches in clubs, schools that have that philosophy. That's my philosophy. Everything you talked about Toulouse, I absolutely love in rugby. Freedom, space. Yeah. Actually, a friend of mine actually suggested I go out with him to the Toulouse Academy next year. And I'd said, definitely, with bells on, I'd love to go, because the idea of space, offloading, playing with freedom. And actually, apparently, if they do hit contact when they shouldn't, that's it. No, they're penalised. And there's a lot of synergy with that, with the third game that we're trying to produce there. But I remember actually playing Bishops from South Africa on the St. Paul's first team pitch. They're over on tour. Then, I don't know whether it's not the same now, but then they weren't allowed to kick, even at first team.
Really?
And they played. It was the most fantastic game of rugby. And the two coaches there, they were wonderfully skillful, talented players. And they just banned kicking. They weren't allowed to kick, and they just ran it from behind the post, ran it from everywhere, because it improved their skill and enjoyment of the race. And it was the most unbelievable game of rugby. We were nowhere near as good as that. It was to the detriment, actually, because we had quite an old school Middlesex Society reffing who didn't ref the offside. So it quickly worked out that if you just press, we got a couple of interceptions and they dropped the ball. Right. I think we either drew or won. But great philosophy, I thought. And it's not, I mean, some schools do that with younger rugby, with junior rugby, but it wasn't necessarily pragmatic. And I don't think, I know Bishops don't do it now because we've played them since away. But then, back in the day, they just weren't allowed to kick and just pass, hit space, which I just thought was fascinating. I thought it was brilliant, actually.
Yeah. Bringing in artificial rules in order to make people problem solve and get out of their comfort zone. Like you mentioned Russell Earnshaw earlier, like he would love that. Yeah. He's coach of the coaches, basically. And trying to develop the people that are developing the kids, as it were. And I think this all comes down to, what do we value more? Do we value winning Saturday, or do we value developing youngsters and having a good style of play that people are going to enjoy? Parents are going to enjoy on the sidelines. Mums are not always going to enjoy watching their sons or daughters play rugby. I think that's a given. It's human nature. But I think if we're saying, no, actually, let's play running rugby, I think that's going to be to the benefit of everyone involved. And I think I'm very hopeful, actually, of where rugby might be. What are your thoughts on 5 years' time, where the school game could be? Like, hopefully some of these rules will be in place. Yeah,
I think the game is in actually great shape. I think the product, and if you watch some of those games at schoolboy level, they're amazing. It's much better quality than it used to be. I think I hope there's more players playing, and the importance of all levels is sort of there's a light shone on that, really. So there's more boys playing. I hope to see more of a focus on movement, passing, the French way, and less of a focus on size. And perhaps, particularly in the under 14 to 16, as be generally, I'm generalising again, but generally just take the pressure off those kids not to have to get massive and big and get on the protein and got to get into these academies. I think that's not education to me, and that I'd like to see change. I think. I think when it gets above 16s and 18s, and that they've developed physically and they're at an age where they can mature, that's a little bit different. But it's at that age, 13, 14 to 16, where I think we've got to focus on skill, and actually you produce better players anyway in the long run. Just skill, space, understanding. Out-thinking sides as well as out-battering them.
I completely agree. And I think it'd be a nice place to get to in 5 years' time if we start to see those academic members of staff coming back wanting to coach again. Because when I reflect on my school days, it was the history teacher that loved taking the under 16 Bs, and it wasn't the most technical coach, but it doesn't matter. You've just got a load of lads having fun, wanting to win.
Well, you look at the Lions fullback. I don't know if you read the article, Hugo Keenan. It was in, what do they call the school in Dublin? Blackrock. He was in the under 15 D team.
Was he really?
Yeah, and there's a picture of him, and it was in the Times. Under 15, I think he might have got in the C's for a game. There was a picture of him. He was under 15 D. And that, obviously their rugby's staggeringly strong, but it just does show you, doesn't it? Quite a lot of the boys that come into St. Paul's start off in the D's or E. By the time they get to first team. They're brilliant, the first team players. So you've got to actually produce a game that actually is accessible and brilliant for everybody. And I think there's such a bright future for rugby, I think. But just because it's in a good shape and the product is good, it doesn't mean to say we can't make it better. And I think
totally.
And I think there's a lot of optimism I've got. But I do think, I also think there's some great rugby being played sort of in the Premiership as well. And I'm a huge fan of the sort of sides that do move the ball and do. I'm not just saying this because you used to play for it. I love watching Northampton play. I think Sam Vesti's a great coach, and you watch the way they hit space and they're coached to hit space, and they're bringing all players into play in wide spaces, and that's great coaching. Not just thinking, actually, I need to plough through 4 times. You've got to earn the right to go wide. But I love the way he coaches and the sort of rugby they play. I think they were a bit unlucky, weren't they? They lost a lot of England players, didn't they, to England? So they didn't do quite as well last year, but they still did all right in Europe. And
a few in the pack. Northern did very well in Europe, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I think, Vesti's got a very, very bright future.
Yeah.
I think everyone sort of acknowledges what he's done to that back line, but also they've done a phenomenal job of bringing people through the academy.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Bringing big lumps through. Like everyone that comes through, particularly in that back line, is a really good ball player.
Yeah.
And Tommy Freeman's 6'4" and however much he weighs, but he can also
play. Can't he? Yeah.
And I think you have to be able to play, even if you're a winger, to be in the Saints back line. And maybe some other team, I don't know, Van der Merwe, I saw playing in a Lions game, a few weeks ago. I was like, he doesn't quite have those skills because he's not had to, because he's a bit of a freak of nature in terms of his size and pace.
I don't know if you watch much of the England tour of Argentina, actually, but again, I think it was Lee Blackett was the attack coach. He used to be coach at Rotherham, I think, but I thought there was real progress in England. Ford was at 10. And they had some good young players, but I thought they played a really good style of rugby, and their attack went forward. And I know the coaches were out with the Lions, etc., the normal ones, but I thought I enjoyed watching that more actually than the Lions in a funny sort of way. I thought England in Argentina were fantastic, and some really promising young talent.
More of a license to play, right? Than the Lions lot, where it's all sort of results orientated, obviously, and it has to be at that sharp end.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean they couldn't play a slightly better brand of rugby. I didn't actually see any of the England tour, so that was a shame. But
watch it. It's good.
Massive fan of George Ford. I think he was probably quite unlucky. There's a few people quite unlucky with the Lions stuff, but there we go. Well, Glenn, I've loved this. It's been fun to catch up, and best of luck. Under 15s going to.
We're going to Cambridge. We're going to Cambridge, and then obviously we start the season, I think, against Epsom College, who are really strong. And then so still get very excited about that. Looking forward to it. But thank you for inviting me, and thank you for it's been a lovely morning, and it's a nice environment. It's great office you got
up here. That's the only problem.
Yeah, lots of light though. And
mid-August. It is lucky. It is lovely. We're very lucky to be here. One final question for you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but obviously, parental perception is big at the moment. Driving decisions with whether they let their kids play. If you had 30 seconds with a group of parents thinking of pulling their children from the sport, what might you say to them?
Well, I think I've probably already said it, but look, the game there's never been more done to make the game safer. And I'd talk them through what I've already said. I'd also say to them, look, what your son will get or daughter will get from playing rugby will serve them well in life through character, through just common purpose, through a sense of belonging, which makes them happy in school, and massive correlation, I think, when children are happy, to them doing better in their exams as well, and generally, in life, and leadership as well. It's such a brilliant game. So they would be the two things I'd focus on. And I think, I'm optimistic, Nick. I think, we've just got to keep looking forward and keep sort of shining a light on trying to make it safer and better, and less about size.
Yeah. Well, no, hats off to you for doing something about that. It's very impressive. And I really hope that some of those aspects from the third game we see implemented in 16s and below. Very, very, very good. Right, I will link some of the resources I mentioned in an RFU paper. I'll do that, a Guardian article and also the St Paul's School website. But Glenn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your summer break. And,
Thank you.
Let's stay in touch.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was the Luca Health Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe for more content like this. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube.